Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Way of Life Big Books study. I'm Dave, and I'm a recovered alcoholic.
And my name is Blythe, and I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic.
Hey, Blythe. Let's stand for the surrender. God,
Grant me the
serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Thanks, guys.
Ask somebody to read the preamble.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Amanda, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Amanda.
Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The requirement for membership is the desire of self-development. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sex, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda. And Patricia, the set aside?
Yeah, Patricia, alcoholic.
Hello, Patricia.
Set aside prayer. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, the 12 steps, this book, the meetings, my disease, and me with God. So I may have an open mind and an experience with all these things. Please let me see the truth.
Thank you very much, Patricia.
Thanks. At this meeting, Blythe and myself are going to read and explain the first portion of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And at the end, there's going to be some time for questions and discussion. There's papers and pens for highlighting and writing questions or notes or what have you down. And we left off last week on page 8 in Bill's story.
So I just want to do a quick recap for people who weren't here last week, who haven't been through this part of the book. It sounds like we're only 8 pages in, but really there's the doctor's opinion and the forewords and the title page and the preface before that, what we would call an introduction. So some of the things that we talked about in there is on the title page, it says the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism, right? And the story is in italics. Anything in italics is very important. So when I compare my story to the story of the first 100, these guys got sober and stayed that way. And I couldn't, right? On my own power, I could never get sober, right? But these guys did. So if I do what they do, then I'm going to get what they got, right? We have this common problem, common solution, and a common course of action, right? We have the same problem, and if we do what they do, then we're going to get what they got. We went through the forewords. The forewords are kind of like a history of Alcoholics Anonymous. Lots of really good information in there, right? Oftentimes people will take their sponsee and they'll say, well, let's start on page 1, right? But they're missing that vital information, particularly in the doctor's opinion, right? So Dr. Slopeworth laid out our illness for us. He talks about this allergy or phenomenon of craving that when I have one drink, I never just have one drink, right? It's always more, right? So, we ask ourselves, when I have one drink, do I get thirstier, right? And that's a big part of what makes us alcoholic, is that non-alcoholic, ordinary, average person does not, right? They have 1 or 2 glasses of wine with dinner and they go home, right? We don't spend the next 8 months burning down our lives, right? And he very subtly talks about the second symptom of alcoholism, right? Two symptoms in alcoholism. One is the body, that allergy, phenomenon of craving. The second, this malady that centers in our mind. And Dr. Slopeworth just kind of touches on it just a little bit because we want to ease us into that second symptom through the following chapters, right? Because if the doctor said, you're insane, right? We'd be like, close the book and we'd leave. Wouldn't stick around for very long, right? But and that gets us into Bill's story. So we read the first part of Bill's story right up to the point where he has this step 1 experience. The last sentence we read was, alcohol was my master, right? So isn't that admitting powerlessness, right? That left to my own devices, I'm going to drink again, right? So we'll start off there. Yep. No words can tell.
Nope. Oh, you want to read that paragraph again?
Yeah.
Fine, let's do everything you want to do. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master.
Right, that's a step one experience, right? That idea, quicksand stretched around me in all directions. Do I have any power in that? Right? I'm completely powerless, right? So, without a step one experience and understanding what alcoholism is and understanding that I'm screwed, that's what helps me develop willingness to look at step two, right? Because if I still think that I can do this on my own, am I going to look for God? Probably not, right? Deep down inside me somewhere, I'm still going to be saying, I can do this, right? I got this.
Yeah, that obsession that the book talks about, that we can someday quit on our own. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man.
Right, so this is his first time in treatment, right?
Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink. And on Armistice Day 1934, I was off again.
Right, so we talk about this insanity of the first drink, right? It's insane that we continue to pick up that first drink, right? It's insane. And we have these called strange mental blank spots, right? Where my day's going just fine, all of a sudden I have a glass in my hand, pounding on the bar, saying, how did this happen? How did I pick up again, right? Like, we don't have a choice over that first drink. I have an illness, right? And this is the second symptom, why I keep picking up that drink. Oh, and Armistice Day is Remembrance Day in the States.
Yeah. I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I'd have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end.
Right, so they used to just throw you in these big insane asylums, basically, right? Hospitals for alcoholics, right?
Or you just drank yourself to death.
Or you drank yourself to death.
How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debacle. I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes.
Sorry, I made a bit of a mistake. This was his second time in treatment.
Yeah.
So the first time he was in treatment, he thought that self-knowledge was the answer, right? I could think my way through the drink. He said, thanks, Dr. Silkworth, for telling me the information on alcoholism, but I got this, right? And the goose hung high for a few months, and then he got loaded again. And then he left this is his second time in treatment, and it said fear sobered me for a bit, right? So is fear going to work? Didn't work for Bill. Won't work for me. Yeah. Right? I'm scared of that first drink. That's not enough. It's not enough.
Yeah, so when he talks about knowledge of step one, right, like we told him about the allergy and the malady that he was going to keep drinking, and he was like, yeah, so gotcha, just don't drink. Got it. And it didn't work. Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen with a certain satisfaction. I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night into the next day.
So this guy's on like a 2-week bender, right? He started on Remembrance Day, and now it's the end of November.
My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old friend asked if he might come over. He was sober.
Right, so that's in italics, right? Like, my friends, none of them got sober. Some of them are still drinking, and a few of them have died, right? None of them got sober.
Yeah, and that old friend was Ebby Thatcher. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York. In that condition, I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he had escaped. Of course, he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him, unmindful of his welfare. I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility. The very thing an oasis, drinkers are like that. The door opened and he stood there, fresh, skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened?
I love this sentence about there was something about his eyes, right? In the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, when we really grab a hold of this thing, man, we don't have to ask how we're doing, right? You just look at a person and give them a smile and you're like, yeah, right? It's good, man. It's good.
I pushed a drink across the table like a dick, and he refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had got into the fellow. He wasn't himself. "Come, what's all this about?" I queried. He looked straight at me, simply but smilingly. He said, "I've got religion." I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right. But bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gym would last longer than his preaching. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how 2 men had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked.
Right, so the guy who carried the message to Bill was Ebby Thatcher from the Oxford groups. And the Oxford groups, they were a religious group. They were a Christian group. And they had 6 steps or 6 tenets, they called them. And so this guy was there to carry the message to Bill. And these 2 guys that appeared in court was Roland Hazard, and I'm not sure about the other guy. Roland Hazard's part of his story is further on in the pages. So this religious program and practical program of action, right? That's not what AA is, but AA is the spiritual program with the practical program of action, right? And also from this Oxford groups is when the idea of saying, my name's blank and I'm an alcoholic, that's where that came from, because the Christians in the Christian group, if they weren't alcoholic, when you said, my name's blank, I'm an alcoholic, they put you in the alcoholic group rather than the straight Christian group.
He had come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless.
There's that step 1 experience showing through again, right? Yeah. He knows he's screwed. He knows that he can't drink, but he keeps drinking, right?
I wrote in my book, so am I. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays, way over there on the hillside. There was that preferred temperance pledge I never signed, my grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings, his insistence that the spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen, his fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. Those recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard.
So what's happened here is this guy's questioning Bill on some spiritual principles, right? And Bill's thinking back to when he was a kid about God, right? And that's what I did when I came into the fellowship and I saw God on the walls. I was like, oh man, I remember when I was about 10 years old and I thought about God. Is God real? Is God not real? All these kinds of things, right? And I think we kind of tend to do that, right? We think about our childhood experiences, right?
Yeah, so he's got preconceived notions of what God is, right? That wartime day in Old Winchester Cathedral came back again. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are. For that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere.
Right, so difference between atheism and agnosticism, right? Like atheists are like, there is no God, period. Right, where agnostics, we're kind of more like, I don't know.
Yeah, I just noticed too that he used that word like the blind faith, but it again shows
it's
like
faith, yeah.
It's still faith,
yeah.
Right? Like just not the right faith. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlie it all.
I love that, mighty purpose and rhythm. Cool.
How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I'd gone. With ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory.
It's funny, right? We know lots of people who come in and they're like, I just have a problem with the God part. Fuck it, we all do. If we didn't, we wouldn't be alcoholics.
Yeah, it's actually our solution, right?
Yeah.
To Christ I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded.
Right, that's some good advice for people who come in and they have, different religious ideas, right? And he basically says, take what you like out of it and leave the rest of that, right? Get ready for some new ideas.
The wars which had been fought, the burnings and chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated made me sick. I honestly doubted whether, on balance, the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and sensed, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The brotherhood of man a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me.
Right, so when he says what I'd seen in Europe, right, that's World War I. He fought in World War I, and that was a brutal war, right? And finally, once again, you see that step one stuff coming out, right? If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me.
Yeah, and he's kind of alluding to the fact, if there's a God, why is there war and suffering and all these things that, I know I used to say, right? But my friend sat before me, and he made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known.
This is really cool stuff, right? And as recovered alcoholics or alcoholics in recovery, this is what we get to offer to people coming through the door or people in our community, all that kind of stuff, right? Like, I drank how you drank. I felt how you felt. I had the same experiences, but I don't drink anymore, right? That's cool stuff.
Had this power originated in him? Obviously, it had not. There would be no more power in him than there was in me at that minute. And this was none at all.
Powerless.
Mm-hmm. That floored me. I began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped new soil.
Right? That idea of self-knowledge, right? I didn't just retrain myself or practice a better diet or any of these things, right? He was on a different footing. His roots grasped new soil, right? New purpose in life, right?
Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a Tsar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way.
Yeah, so there's some ideas for, a power greater than ourselves, right? Our conception, spirit of the universe, creative intelligence.
I think this part of the book is why they wrote We Agnostics, hey?
Yeah.
My friend suggested What then seemed a novel idea, he said, why don't you choose your own conception of God?
So this is wild stuff, right? So Ebby came from a Christian group, and instead sitting Bill down and saying, Bill, why don't you believe in Jesus? Right? He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God, right? To me, like, that's almost where AA was born, right? Like, we talk about, AA's date being when Bill met Dr. Bob. But this part here, when Ebby said that, like, that shook all the foundations of the Oxford group. And really, that's some of the stuff that AA adopted, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's like the fundamental difference between the two, really. That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last.
Amazing, right?
It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning.
So anything in italics, very important. And what does Bill say is required to make his beginning? Willingness, right? Take that home tonight. Just willingness is what we need.
Yeah, willing to believe. So that's kind of step 2, right?
Yeah.
I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would.
So, in a roundabout way, Bill's sitting at the kitchen table with Ebby drinking, admits he's completely powerless, becomes willing to believe in something greater than himself. He just did step 1 and step 2, sitting at the table drinking with Ebby.
Thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At long last I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view.
A new world came into view.
The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness to have him with me, and he came. But soon the sense of his presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly those within myself. And so it had been ever since. How blind I had been. At the hospital, I was separated from alcohol for the last time. Treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of DTs.
Right? 3rd time in treatment, Bill. Okay?
There I humbly offered myself to God.
Sounds like step 3, right?
As I then understood him, to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, that without him I was lost. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have a newfound friend take them away. Root and branch, I have not had a drink since.
Sounds like step 5, right?
My schoolmate visited me, and I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. We made a list of people I had hurt or toward whom I had felt resentment.
Step 4.
I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals, admitted my wrongs.
Step 8.
Never was I to be critical of them. I was to write all such matters to the utmost of my ability. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within.
This is step 11. This is the good stuff, man.
Common sense would thus become uncommon sense.
That's wild, right? The things I thought of as common sense? Not anymore.
I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. Never was I to pray for myself, except as my request bore on my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure. My friend promised when these things were done, I would...
So hold on a second. I just want to say, like, when I was working with my first sponsor and we went through this, like, just like Ebby promised Bill these things, right? These are the things that I promise you if we're thorough about this throughout the process of the steps and applying, right? Step 11 is about applying these principles to my life. Like it says to sit quietly when in doubt, asking for strength and direction, all that kind of stuff. It takes time to practice that, right? But when I do that, these same promises, right? I promise you the same thing. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. that I'd have the elements of a way of living which answered some of my problems.
All my problems,
All my
right? My sex problems, my relationship problems, my financial problems, all my problems. And the thing is that I love about this, right? It says, when these things are done, I will enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. It doesn't say I will enter upon a new relationship with my Creator and then do the steps, right? I get the spiritual awakening by going through this process, right? I don't have to believe in a higher power in step 2. I just have to be willing to believe in something, right? The steps get me to a place where I have a spiritual experience. We often put the carriage before the horse in this. Like, oh, you don't believe in God yet? You're not done 3, right? No, that's not how it works, right? We get you there.
Belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, step 2, honesty in step 4, and humility in step 5, to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. Simple, but not easy. A price had to be paid.
And that's something that comes up in my life all the time, right? Like, this stuff is not easy. It's not easy going out and making amends to people we've harmed. It's not easy talking about my deep, dark shit in step 5. But it is simple. Just got to do it.
It meant destruction of self-centeredness.
Ouch.
Shit. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all.
All things.
These were revolutionary and drastic proposals. But the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric.
I love this, right? Like, I remember the first day I sat down with my sponsor and we talked about my willingness to go to any length for victory over alcohol, to recover from this illness, right? Are you willing to go to any lengths? And I said yes, and we talked about it. And I remember going home that night and going, maybe, just maybe, this might work for me. Wow, electric.
And so you would say you had a sense of victory?
Yeah.
Followed by such a peace and serenity as I'd ever known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up, as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through.
Spiritual awakening, sudden, profound spiritual awakening.
God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound.
Right, there's a whole preface or appendix in the back of the book called Spiritual Appendix, and it explains that not all of us have these sudden and profound spiritual experiences like Bill did. Some of us grow into it slowly over a few months, but it always comes.
For a moment I was alarmed. I called my friend the doctor to ask if I were still sane. He listened in wonder as I talked. Finally shook his head, saying, "Something has happened to you. I don't understand, but you'd better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were."
Right, so this was Dr. Silkworth, the guy who wrote the doctor's opinion. And, we have these profound experiences. I've had guys call me right after they're 5 or even after 3, and they're like, "I'm not sure what's going on, man. I kind of feel weird." Right?
Yeah.
Right? And that's that higher power working in their lives. I love how it says anything is better than the way you were. When we talk about powerlessness, it's not just the way I feel. Right? I am truly powerless over alcohol. Right? I'm going to drink until I die. The outside people can see that too, like Dr. Silkworth did. Right? He's like, anything's better than the way you were.
The good doctor now sees many men who have such experience. He knows that they are real.
I'm sure the doctor saw hundreds of these experiences between Bill and Bob and the early guys. Like, they were just hammering this thing back in the 30s, man. Like, it was unreal.
He talks about it in the doctor's opinion.
Yeah.
He gives 2 examples.
Yeah.
While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given to me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They in turn might work with others.
Step 12.
My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs.
Some of my affairs?
All of my affairs.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah. Particularly was it imperative to work with others, as he had worked with me.
So it's this idea that this energy, right? Step 2 is about a transfer of energy from my old ways of thinking and my old behavior patterns and my old belief systems, right, into this new way. And this energy flows through me if I do it right. If I'm practicing step 11 and 12, it flows through me. It doesn't just stop with me, right? For me to go, I'm better. That's it, right? Selfishness, self-centeredness. And it says here that faith without works is dead, And if I don't practice these principles and carry this message, I will be too.
That was my line. Just kidding.
Sorry.
And especially at this point, right? Because he just kind of, this whole process of the 12 steps is being formed right now, right? So if he went through this process himself and was like, wow, that really worked. Done. None of us would be here today because it wouldn't exist, right? And how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. If he drank, he would surely die. Then fate would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that.
It's crazy, right? We talk about this like, then faith would be dead indeed. If we drank, we'd die, right? And it sounds like it's light and fluffy, right? But the truth is if I pick up again, that phenomenon of craving kicks in. I'm not just having a drink, right? I'm having a drink of wine with dinner and I'm spending the next 8 months selling my shit, right? Until I die.
Yeah, and this is where a lot of people fall short, right? I did the steps. Why did I drink again? Well, did you enlarge and perfect your spiritual life by self-sacrifice and working with others? No. My wife and I abandon ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems.
So this is confirmation of Bill's psychic change or spiritual experience, right? Confirmation of step 2, coming to believe in this power, is step 12. Because if I believe in that power, I'm going to share it. And I also like how it says, my wife and I abandon ourselves with enthusiasm. I don't think Lois had all that much enthusiasm, right? She's like, Bill, stop taking drunks home.
Cruising the streets for hobos to bring home. Another stray, damn it, Bill. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment.
Right, so we talk about having this spiritual experience and not thinking about drinking, right? A year and a half, he's still plagued by resentments and self-pity. He couldn't work yet. And the next sentence, go ahead, Dave.
This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink.
Right, so it's not that he's not thinking about drinking, but he's not drinking. There's a difference. There's a difference between thinking about drinking and drinking, right? Carry on.
Yeah, I think too, he couldn't find work for a year and a half because he was such a bottomed out garbage can that no one wanted. Yeah, sure, you're sober, Bill. I haven't heard that before, bud. But I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day.
Right, so step 12 really works in these darker places, right? When I'm feeling down or self-pity and I'm fucking hurting, I'm going to grab a hold of a new guy and start this process, right? Because that's what gets that energy flowing through me again.
Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going.
Right, rough going.
We commenced to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. Have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out.
Right, does that happen just by going to meetings? No.
I have seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. In one western city and its environs there are 1,000 of us and our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek.
So why do we meet frequently? Why do we go to meetings? It says right here, so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. I'm not going to meetings to talk about my shit.
I thought we were supposed to go there to talk about like traffic and how
Traffic and babysitting? No.
Yeah,
No.
okay. I was just checking.
We're there to help the newcomer, right? The guy who's dying coming in through the door. We're there to grab these guys and get them into this book, potentially save their lives.
At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power. An alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature.
This guy tells me some crazy stories, Dave. Like, he was an unlovely creature, man.
Yeah, I sure was, you bet. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not, or would not, see
Yeah, so
our
that's
way of life.
right. And how it works, it talks about the can-nots and the will-nots, right? Those who recover are people who cannot or will not.
Usually will not.
Yeah.
There
Call them
is-
the will-nots.
Yeah. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity.
Right? When you come to a meeting, everybody's laughing and joking and even talking about some of the crazy shit we did, and we have some humor in that, right? Worldliness and levity. Carry on.
Yeah, we come to the fellowship and tell our story, and it's just like horrible, and everyone laughs. Tell that same story at like a dinner party, and everyone's like, "What the fuck is wrong with this guy? You did what? What? That's not normal? I don't know." But just underneath, there's a deadly earnestness.
Deadly earnestness, right? That's how we stay sober, man. We got to come at this thing with some real zeal.
Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish.
That's step 11. That's step 11. Faith has to work in and through, right? And 12, right? And through us, or we perish. That's it.
Most of us feel we need look no further for utopia.
Life's pretty good today, man.
We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. Bill W., co-founder of AA, died January 24th, 1971.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We're going to shut her down there today. We'll open up the sharing session.
Just staring.
The sharing session.